India's NavIC system is facing a major operational challenge. Only 3 positioning, navigation and timing satellites are currently active. In the past, the system had 7 operational satellites. The reduction follows failures involving the satellite's atomic clocks. This matter because NavIC was created to give India an independent satellite navigation capability. It reduces India's dependence on foreign systems such as GPS and GLONASS. NavIC was designed around a constellation of 7 satellites. It provides navigation and timing services across India and around 1,500 kilometers beyond its borders. The system has 2 services. The first is the standard positioning service for civilian users. The second is an encrypted restricted service designed for strategic and military applications. But with only 3 active satellites, NavIC is now below the 4 satellite minimum required for standalone positioning. So what does this mean for India's military? For the army, operations in remote and mountainous areas continue to use multi-constellation systems, but troops temporarily lose the advantage of an exclusive Indian navigation fallback. That means greater reliance on blended foreign signals. For the Navy, navigation across Indian Ocean remains functional. Naval systems can integrate signals from multiple constellations, but the Navy loses some of the regional precision and strategic independence that NavIC provides. The Air Force also continues to operate. Its tactical systems can combine signals from different global navigation networks, but there is a concern in a potential electronic warfare environment. Jamming or spoofing could make dependence on signals which are external a greater vulnerability. The most sensitive concern is for the Strategic Forces Command. Missile guidance and precision strike system face narrow margins against disruption. Until NavIC's constellation is restored, these systems will have to rely more on inertial navigation and alternative GNSS networks. This does not mean India's military has lost its navigation capability. The issue is about strategic reliance. NavIC gives India another layer of protection. It provides an Indian alternative if foreign navigation signals are disrupted, denied, or spoofed. In a conflict, it can become a question of strategic autonomy. And that is why the bigger question is, how quickly can India restore the full NavIC constellation and rebuild this critical navigation safety net? On this issue, I am joined by Air Commodore Dr. Ashwinder Singh Bahal, Major General Sudhakarji, and Group Captain V.N. Jha. Thank you all of you for joining me. Air Commodore Dr. Ashwinder Singh, it's good to see you after a long time. Traveling abroad, so good to have you on my show. But I'll start with General Sudhakarji. Sudhakarji, I was watching Operation Safed Sagar when Kargil was being fought. It says Americans jammed our precision technology, which was primarily GPS, and we had to rely on compass with NavIC not being at its optimum best. How do you decode it for our viewers? And what does it mean for our army?
Yeah, Kartikeya, good evening. Thank you for inviting me for your show and my very warm greetings to distinguished and esteemed co-panelists. uh, they did not jam. I think they disconnected. I happened to be there during Operation Vijay myself. I was in Siachen Glacier. I was a major, and my battalion had been given exclusive task to evict Pakistanis in Turtuk subsector. So, if I respect my memory, and I'm quite witness to it in Siachen Glacier as well, the the GPS connection was disconnected. That's how we had to fall back to our basics, the compass and the map. I'm sure Air Commodore will bear me out as Group Captain Jha. That was the criticality. The criticality was such that having actually made us dependent on GPS, it's like moving in a city like Delhi without GPS. You people are blinded. You cannot reach A, B, C. It has become a way of life. So similarly, fortunately, we are grounded. We remain uh, tied to the traditional practices, but it is definitely very difficult to switch from GPS back to maps and compass. And now, when you are talking about the NavIC system, and thanks to you, during our personal conversation, I had read the topic, and you only had given the suggestion that we need to highlight the criticalities that India is facing. I must compliment you and your
Thank you.
channel for having brought out the issue. Time is now. We cannot afford to delay any further. NavIC system, one is aware that in 2025, I'm sure Group Captain Jha will bear me out. He's a senior scientist. Somehow the satellite did not, it was a failure mission. Thereafter, I think it was a sabotage. To my little bit of joining of dots, it's a sabotage by the foreign powers. And thereafter, we have envious, I think, three, four, five, everything is waiting, ready to be launched. We need to reactivate, we need to
Okay.
revive our navigation system and minimize our dependence on the foreign sources
Okay.
as soon as possible. Otherwise, Operation Sindur, I am saying, with due humility, it has been a great, unparalleled success. Thank God, the Air Commodore is going to explain to us. He has been a fighter pilot himself. You'll tell us how did we achieve this success without our being dependent on GPS. It's
Okay.
a remarkable victory.
Then let me go to Dr. Bahal. Dr. Bahal.
Thank you, Kartikeya. Thank you for coming back after a long gap and such eminent co-panelists I have, especially General Saab. I have great respect for. Let me tell you, my squadron participated in the Kargil War. I was the commanding officer of a MiG-27 squadron, and then we did try to do the GPS-aided bombing. But what the Americans had done, they had degraded it to the civil version, which means that you had an inaccuracy inbuilt of 100 meters, which was already built into it. So with this, there were large errors initially. Now, what we did at that period of time was we quickly requested Israel, and they gave us the lightning pod, which had a forward-looking infrared FLIR system as well as a laser, designation for the bombs. And we quickly modified. And Mirage's my own friend, Wing Commander Nambiar, was one of the first ones to drop this bomb over Tiger Hill. And let me tell you, our brave army was suffering huge losses here, primarily because of steep mountain climb and with the small, even though it may be small enemy entrenched upstairs, but they were giving a continuous volley of fire. And when these bombs were dropped, the target was obliterated. And Indian Army, as always, is victorious, even if the situations are very hard. Now, I come to the second point. Why is it important and so important? What we need today, is not just NAV1C getting back to its original status, because at its height, it had 7 operational satellites. And though its life was given as 10 to 11 years, but it primarily was even within 3 years. That is the first one, from 2013 when it was launched in 2016. The atomic clocks, the root cause of this whole failing has been the atomic clocks, which are made of rubidium. And there is a Swiss company, Spectra Time, which was making it. And we had bought it in quite numbers when we started integrating it with those 7 satellites. And we found that 36% was failure rate, primarily because there was a small capacitor which got overheated and shorted. And because it was in series to give the direct DC current, the other 2 clocks, there are total 3 clocks at that time. Now we are planning to have 4 with 2 rubidium and 2 cesium, because the GPS satellite system uses cesium clocks also. And because of which they are more redundant. Now we are going to have cesium and including rubidium clocks are being built in India. So that's going to be a great plus as and when we launch, like the general was mentioning, NVS 03, 04, 05, 10,000 crores have already been given. Second was the problem with the PSLV, which actually had 36% failure rates at that time of launching navigation satellites, because these satellites are, injected at high Earth orbit. Unlike the GPS satellites, which are at 20,200 kilometers, these satellites are at 35,700 plus kilometers, which is close to 36,000 kilometers. And because of the precise injection required at these in different longitudes, because we have 3 different longitudes at which there are 3 geosynchronous, I stand corrected, 3 geostationary Earth orbit satellites and 4 geosynchronous orbit satellites, which give it the proper geometry so that 4 are looking at the target system. Now, the first question that arises is, why 4? Why can't a one satellite do that job? And this is primarily because there are 4 variables. One is the latitude, second is the longitude, third is the altitude, and fourth is the time. The time that the signal takes from there the satellite to the receiver, and that is determining the exact position to a pinpoint on the space, because it's a 3D image that you have, and the fourth is the time. So any of these satellites, if it's reduced below 4, the covering that area, then the entire PNT which you mentioned, positioning, navigation, timing, will not take place. For example, if there are 3 satellites, and let us say it is, you can identify the position in terms of latitude, longitude, but still altitude is left. So in that entire 36,000 kilometers, up to 30, the user could be anywhere, or the target could be anywhere. So
Okay.
this is where there is a requirement of 4. The government is working at it. It's already started, like the general was mentioning. We are looking at the NAV1C getting operational in the next few years. My request to the government would be to quickly hurry it up. And also, there's two major things the government is doing. The first is it is replacing the PSLV with LVM3, and that is the launch vehicle. And second, what it is doing is that it is making the L1 frequency mandatory. Now, Group Captain Jha, he is words of knowledge on this he
Okay.
has, and he'll be able to tell
Okay.
more about this. How does those frequencies make a difference?
Okay. So, Group Captain Shah, what is the issue at play here? Why are we down to 3, sir?
Kartikeyan, I would like to be absolutely precise with the technicality for the time being. Look, there was supposed to be a constellation of 7 satellites, out of which it forms the RNSS circle. RNSS A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I. So there are more than 7 right now. What had happened is that, Ekamoto told you precisely that atomic clock of RNSS 1A that failed some time back, a rather long time back, and and you can't operate this NavIC system without the atomic clock. And rightly, he told you that it had the rubidium type of atomic clock. There are another 2 types, cesium and hydrogen. So that atomic clock having failed, that had to be replenished, and that is why RNSS 1H was sent up in August 2017. But that PSLV failed. That failed to inject the satellite. So as a backup, there was a RNSS 1I sent in April 2018, and that had the functionality of this rubidium. And you know that in the past few years, the NavIC system has been working. uh, I wish there was an ISRO scientist here with us who has been working on to the GSAT program. Satellites are in 3 orbits: geostationary, medium plane, and the lower plane orbits. And all these 3 have got different types of operations. It's like a doctor having specialists of ear, nose, throat, and something else. I wish that that scientist with the GeoSat was here with us. He would have told us whether he has sent any of these so-called non-functional satellite out of the orbit. There is a graveyard orbit wherein any of the satellites misbehaving or non-functional, becoming non-functional in next 3 months, are usually pushed out by another about say 235 to 500 kilometers up. It goes into the graveyard thing, so that as to vacate the slot where another satellite for the geostationary is going to be placed. So I'm not sure if any of those satellites have been pushed up. To my knowledge, none. Of course, 1A had failed in its atomic clock, so it has been assigned another task. That is a communication task. 1H has not reached there at all. So right now, the functionality, in my knowledge, with the few, the inputs that I have, is still working. It is not failed totally, but we always have uh, corollary parameters in the functions like NavIC system, where you can't even deviate 1 second from your course. So looking at that, the supplementary functions and the other parameters, which are absolutely colloquial to the main parameters, You need more functionality, more atomic clock. Like what he mentioned, there was a rubidium clock, the main rubidium clock, and that was the only clock. And that is also in the one eye. So the functionality has not gone, but should it go out at any time, we don't have any backup. So it will fail. And when it will fail, you won't know. If one of our ships are already in course, it will deviate. Now next thing comes up, can we continue working with this? Of course, we can continue working with this, but here Komodo was mentioning you very in details that they are geostationary Earth orbits. They are geosynchronous. Four satellites are then synchronous, all four sitting in the four limbs of eight. Geosynchronous satellites keeps on moving around the latitude and longitude in the figure of eight, and all four limbs of that eight always have one satellite to support all the parameters to give you all functionality. And that is how it is supposed to work. Now, should any of these satellites go out, then you are absolutely having no control over the functionality of the important functions of the defense, either aircraft or the ship or anything else. So that is why it is not right now panic button press right now, but there is a concern area. Should any time this particular atomic clock go out, do we have anything to stand by? Answer is no. So that is why it must go. Second thing, not that these satellites cannot be sent by PSLV. No, as long as the payload of the satellite, which has got the atomic clock or which can supplement one A or one H or one I, that payload can be sent up to the geostationary orbit. That is at Air Commodore mentioned to you 35,786 kilometers to be precise. That is where it makes one
Okay.
round of the Earth in
Okay.
23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.9 seconds.
Okay.
So that is what the velocity and the altitude has to be met. Now, if any rocket, be it PSLV or be it GSLV or LVM, any of these are capable of sending that particular payload, that many kgs of payload to that altitude, it is sufficient enough. But right now we have got a concern that PSLV has failed last time, GSLV has failed last time, LVM. Right now we are using for different
Okay.
purposes, like man rated. So we are
Okay.
using for the Gaganyaan purposes. So when that next satellite is going, it is going to make the life much more easier. You have a room to breathe. Right now you don't have that room to breathe.
Okay. On this note, I'll say thank you to all of you. And I made this promise to General Sudhakarji. Every week, at least 3 to 4 times, we are going to pick up issues directly concerned with our forces and talk about it. It's not going to be what we have done. It's going to be about what we need to do for them. And I think that will be the motto of my program.